Hello, everybody. My name is Mike Murphy. I am the professor of this particular section of online 1020 at Pellissippi State. I know this introduction is a little bit overdue, about a week overdue or so, but of course it's been a pretty crazy week. But I wanted to post this video today in order to make sure that you were caught up and brought up to speed about the stuff from last week that I posted and that was available to you, and then also talk a little bit about not only what we're doing this week, but the larger essay project that we're going to start working on this week. Basically, as far as last week goes, you saw the announcements. I see a lot of people have already done the initial discussion post, which is just an introductory limerick, and then the reading quiz, which covered the syllabus and the policies discussed within that syllabus. If you got them done, great. If you were unable to access your computer for whatever reason due to the weather last week, just know that everything is open and will remain open for the rest of this week, in addition to the new stuff that will appear that will be due also by the end of this week. So I don't want anyone to get off on a bad foot because of the weather. Give everybody a chance to catch up. But we are going to have to kind of push forward in order to stay on task. Now, this being an online class, things like the snow shutting down campuses probably shouldn't affect us as much. So hopefully everybody has what they need at home to take care of this work this semester. Whether or not we ever receive another couple days off because of the weather, if you have anything that you need of me, of course, let me know. As far as the work last week, I definitely want to make sure everyone read through the syllabus, that everyone has the textbook for the course, which is the shorter 14th edition of the Norton Introduction to Literature. You do need to buy that textbook. If you haven't got it yet, there's a little bit of fluff in the first couple of weeks where you can get by without it. And I do that on purpose because I know sometimes it takes a while to get the textbook. But by the time we move into the second unit of the course, you will need the textbook. As far as the textbook goes, I've actually been away from mine. I left mine on my desk at the office last week, and I haven't been able to get to it. So I apologize for the fact that a lot of the things online are incorrectly numbered, or the pages are listed incorrectly because the textbook has been updated since the last time I taught this class. So I will fix all that as soon as I can, but it's going to be at least now until Wednesday before I'm going to be able to have access to my textbook. So our first essay project is going to be about poetry. It's analyzing and responding to poetry. I know that not everybody super loves poetry, and that's a shame because a lot of poetry is really awesome. I know that not only has a lot of poetry been improperly presented to you, but you've also probably only been exposed to old poetry. There's a lot of really good stuff out there. I'm going to try to hip you to a little bit of it this semester, but the goal isn't to make you love poetry. The goal is to show you how to analyze poetry. And we're starting with poetry because what we discuss with this unit will dovetail into what we do later on in the semester with short stories and drama, of course. I also know that a lot of people, when they get assigned a poem to analyze, the first thing that they try to do, and one of the reasons that many people seem to talk themselves out of actually enjoying poetry, is that they want to figure it out. Poetry is presented to you like a puzzle that you've got to decipher. And I want to kind of try to dispel that notion as much as possible on the outset of this. My own experience as an English student saw a lot of poems just being handed to me on a piece of paper where you read it and then you try to analyze it that way. But so much about poetry is about the experience of actually hearing the poem read. So every poem that you'll be assigned to read for this essay actually has a video accompanying it with the original poet reading the poem themselves. It's part of the history of poetry. Poetry is an ear thing. Poetry is a hearing thing. Poetry existed long before we had written language, and the ideal consumption of poetry is not reading the lines on the page. That's fine, but in its essence, I always feel that poetry is meant to be heard, spoken. If you we'll look at the prompt for this essay. You'll see that there is a personal component to this as well. I'm going to refine the suggested outline for you and post a couple of sample essays. This essay is focused largely on your perception of the poem. You don't necessarily have to arrive at the single best reading, as it were, of most poems. This is just about the meaning that the poem has for you and what you bring to it and why. And so there is going to be a lot of there's going to be a lot of room to be personal and to respond to the poem and to speak of what that experience is. But I'm also going to be asking you to perform at least 2 levels of analysis of the poem. And so for this week and next week, we're going to focus on those 2 different levels. And so the work this week is going to be mostly focused on the first level, which is what poetry is supposed to bring to mind. And if you see the notes in Brightspace that I have linked to, the part 1 of analyzing poetry is just about listening to the poem and letting it wash over you without worrying about what the poem means or whether you're getting it or what it's doing. Just what feeling do you get from it? What things are brought to mind? And then speaking more specifically to those things in the analyzing in the part 2 of the notes, which is about imagery and symbolism. And lots of poetry is, focused on presenting a vicarious experience where, whether it positive or negative, happy, sad, angry, frustrated, whether it be philosophical, personal, political, whatever the case may be, the poem is trying to put you in the shoes of a speaker who is looking at a moment and a piece of the world that is in some way quintessentially human and some way worthy of being highlighted in that way. So much of art is about taking moments of real life that most people in their daily lives just sort of let fly right by them and pointing it out and holding your face up to it and going, look at this, this is important. And sometimes that can be as, harrowing and pointed as speaking about the bombing of churches or war atrocities, and sometimes can be as pleasant and seemingly innocuous and mundane as simply trying to get you to visualize a field of daffodils and just smile about it. So, don't worry about whether you get poetry. Just focus more on what it's trying to bring to mind, what it's asking you to hear and see and smell, and then maybe on a deeper level, what the poem symbolizes, what the imagery being presented is meant to be a symbol of. I've linked in the announcement accompanying this video a poem by Paul Lawrence Dunbar named Sympathy. Many people have read that poem. Many people at least know the line, "I know why the caged bird sings." Maya Angelou's autobiography was entitled that, and many people are familiar with that line. If you're curious about what I mean by this, if you read that poem, if you want it to be, it can be simply a poem of a bird in a cage on a pretty summer's day. It exists at that level where if you just sort of are taking in what is being visually and sensorily described to you, that's all the poem is about in some respect. But if you want it to be, it can be a poem. It's a bird that is in a cage on a beautiful day, and the bird is frustrated and shows signs of having been long frustrated at the fact that rather than being out in the world on the pretty day, they're stuck in the cage and they can't get out, and they want to get out, and they see the branch that they would rather sit on than the perch in the cage. And so that is in large what when you are seeing the bird in the cage against the beautiful spring day being described. Yes, it can describe just the bird in the cage, but it can also describe anything about which that feeling comes out. Any kind of feeling trapped or frustrated or being imprisoned or being denied something that you can see. It's right there. It's so clear, and that's what makes the agony of not having it even worse sometimes. If you relate to that feeling at all, then this is a poem that becomes so much more than just about a bird in a cage. So check that poem out. Check out the notes that I've linked. And then for homework this week, there is a chapter reading from the textbook and a discussion post asking you to pick one of two poems and discuss the imagery and the symbolism thereof. Instructions are online. It'll all be linked with this announcement. Take a look at all of those. Let me know if you have any questions about anything coming. This is just the first step in our discussion of poetry and our first step in the work that will go towards our first major essay, which is also in the content. So just check all that out. Let me know if you have any questions. Email me. Come by the office. Otherwise, have a great week. Hopefully, the snow will disappear and we'll be able to go about living our lives like normal. But until then, have fun with this work and let me know if I can help.